This Dharma talk was offered by Robert Beatty, the guiding teacher of PIMC, the Portland, Oregon Insight Meditation Community.
I have a favorite quote. The little book is called, I think, A Short History of Civilization. In that book, in the preface to that book, he says, in the time that we humans have had this brain, this size brain, a brain this capable, for 99.96% of our time, you get the size of that number, 99.96, we lived in small hunting and gathering bands of 50 or less. 0.04 was Mesopotamia, the beginning of what we call civilization. It's mind-boggling, isn't it? And the oldest people among us were 30. We didn't live very long. And we lived in a very tough world. And we didn't treat each other very well either. So we live in a sort of golden age in a way. The Buddha came along, the Buddha, Zoroaster, Jesus a little later, all the great world religions came along in the last 0.02. Consciousness. The ability to wake up and recognize who we are, what we are, and to become really loving. Because you can't be particularly loving when you're just scrabbling to get by, right? Cultures break down. If there's even a hiccup in the food supply, culture breaks down. And then we wind up being not nice to each other. I'm pausing because there's something that wants to be said here that's not quite coming. Oh, I don't give these talks, by the way. This person sitting here he's responsible, but he's not the person who gives the talk. There's someone else inside that I try to listen because he's pretty remarkable at times. Do you know or experience anything more desirable than love? Is there anything, has there been anything in your life that's been more satisfying than looking into the eyes of another person without fear? I don't. So how do we cultivate a person, a relationship, a community where we really experience love? It does require safety. And so way back in the time of the Buddha, 2,600 years, he, of course, spoke about how to get along with each other, how to behave. Because if we're not behaving well, we're in battle with each other. Right? If we allow, this is the other thread, good. I believe in science. The Buddha was a scientist. And he carried out an experiment with an N of 1 to see, is it possible to wake up? Is it possible to become really loving? Is it possible to not fall victim to the animal impulses that we have? Is it possible to stop killing each other? Is it possible to gain control over our emotional reactivity? And he found that the answer to all those things was yes. And he also figured out how to help people train themselves to actually be loving and kind and generous. Something like 99.8% of all species that ever walked the earth are extinct. And along the way, there have been remarkable experiments carried out in terms of consciousness, with us we are the living edge. We are the cambium layer, like in a tree, of consciousness evolution on the planet. And we have a ways to go. But as the Buddha showed and many other great teachers, it is possible to go the rest of the way and really wake up and become capable of seeing that everyone else is who we are, that there's only one of us here. And that, of course, then, I don't have very many Christian quotes, despite my Catholic childhood, but one quote from Jesus was, "Love thy neighbor as thyself." And that was not, I don't think he was speaking metaphorically. He said, love them because they are yourself. And you do something to them and you're actually doing it to yourself. And that changes everything, right? We have the same brain as the crocodiles. On top of that, we have the same brain as the mammals. And on top of that, we have the brain of the human. And that brain is complex. And it's not fully developed when we're born. In fact, it's very, very tiny. I mean, its capacities are vastly more. In one of my incarnations in this lifetime, I had a stepdaughter who was adopted from Guatemala. And her mother almost got her at 8 months, but politics intervened and she didn't get her till 18 months. And then when she got her, she was 40 pounds overweight. And she hadn't been comforted very much at all. And we discovered, much to our chagrin, reactive attachment disorder, which means she didn't have empathy. And the last I saw of her, she was in and out of jail and a meth addict. And not uncommon for people with that injury. And what happens is, as when we're born, the bonding happens and the child is upset and the parent comes and comforts the child and co-regulates with the child and the child goes, ah, and their prefrontal cortex develops the place that develops empathy. It's developed through interaction with other people. That doesn't have to happen if we're not cared for. And if we don't develop that capacity of brain, then we don't sense our oneness with other people. And we don't know what to do with it. We don't have treatment for it. Such people wind up often in jail and almost, we were very much involved in learning about this at one point. We were in family groups and most of the people on death row, if one tests, you do a PET scan of their brain, that part of this cortex doesn't light up. So they, like all of us, are doing their best, but they don't have the tool to actually be empathic for another person. So, not to belabor that, we have in us this very primitive part. And it can be very greedy, it can be very hateful. It's an important part, but there's something else to develop. And we do that through meditation, but we also do it through following a set of precepts, a set of guiding precepts. And I actually mean it when I say, this is the foundation of a happy life. In all spiritual traditions, there are rules. There's the 10 Commandments, and there's always some set of beliefs, some set of practices that keep us from tearing each other apart. And the way the Buddha taught it is really elegant. And how to do it? I think I'll just speak them. I will speak them. And this afternoon, I will put them on my blog, on my website. If you want to see them, go to robertbeatty.com and look for blog, and there will be a posting of this. So I'm going to just speak them through with the second edition of each one I wrote. It's the positive statement I wrote 25 years ago or so. So it goes like this. Now, one more piece before I do that. These are not commandments. These are more like physics. And if you want to be happy, then they're the rules. And it's up to you. They're also experimental hypotheses to be tested. So they're not, and they're also not at all about guilt. They're about wake up. So they go like this. I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from killing other beings. My teacher, Ajahn Sumedho, put it more simply. He said, I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from killing humans. Totally different world. The positive statement of that is, I aspire to become kind and of service to all beings. Second, I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from taking that which is not freely given. It's a diabolical statement, the way it's worded, because I'll come back. The positive statement of that is, I aspire to become a fountain of generosity. Third, I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from sexual acts which cause harm. Positive statement. I aspire to use libido, life energy, to bring love, connection, and beauty into the world. Number 4, I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from unskillful or harmful speech, slander, gossip, lying. I aspire to use speech to create connection and peace and love in the community. Number 5, I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from intoxicants and intoxicating behaviors that cause confusion and dullness in the mind. The positive statement, it is my heartfelt desire to cultivate love, compassion, awareness, mindfulness. That's the waterfront. That's it. Now, I'm going to go through them one at a time. In my meditation the last few weeks, I taught a retreat at Brighton Bush just last week. And I got in pretty deep in my own practice. And I remembered a few of the things that I did in my youth. It wasn't a bad youth. I mean, I didn't really misbehave as some people do, but there's some things when I think about it, it's like, I kind of always think, oh, damn, I was so ignorant. And one of them actually was, there should be a course early in puberty in which they tell us how to say to somebody, you know, I don't want to go out with you anymore. Right? I want to stop. I'm going to stop. As opposed to turning into nasty people. I feel sadness when I talk about that, actually. There's actually one woman who I tried back 15 years ago. I really tried to find her to say I was sorry, because I mean, I didn't do anything terribly awful, but I certainly was not, I was obnoxious. I guess the modern term is basically I ghosted her. And that's become acceptable. It's almost acceptable now to send a text or maybe not even send a text, just stop responding to someone you've been quite close to. That's really violent. Okay. And as I'm saying that, I imagine you have some things in your own past that you feel, which, speaking of which, if you go to my website and look down, I think there's a forgiveness meditation. Yeah, I think there is on the podcasts. And I highly recommend that, because you don't need to carry those knots for the rest of your life. It's really possible to let go. You know why it's possible to let go? Because the past is over. except when we think about it. So, precept number 1. Oh, one more piece, which is, these are the law. I'll use this. See this little light? What will happen if I let go of it? Anybody? It'll fall? Watch. Test 1. Ah! What will happen if I let go of it? Look at my little tremor. Ah! What will happen if I let go of it? What if I did this 1,000 times? We'd start to have a pretty good predictive capacity. We could create a theory, we could call it gravity. The precepts are hypotheses that we can test, and we can say, so what happens if I try to break this rule? And do I end up feeling crappy? Are there consequences for it? And it's not that I'm being punished for some extraterrestrial being. It's that it's just the law. It's just the way it works. And the law is always in violation of our interconnection. No, that's not true. The law says if you violate your interconnection and interbeing, you'll feel bad. So I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from killing. If you go to my website, you can find a very short, very interesting, I think, little article I wrote 20 years ago about killing ratty when we had rats in the house, and I wound up killing them. And the first one was very difficult. And I gave it a nice burial and so on. By the 7th one, it was kind of like, oh, God, another rat, and it went in the trash. We can become inured, I think is the word. We can get used to killing. We train our young people in the military to kill without feeling too much. In fact, right now, around the world, there are people killing each other with pleasure, right? Because they think the other person is non-human, worthy of killing. Now, those people doing that killing are in deep doo-doo. Because somewhere in their lifetime, they're going to realize what they did, and they'll be crushed. I've done some work, not a lot, but some work with veterans of Vietnam War, and those who had their buddies killed beside them have PTSD. Those who killed other people have really PTSD. Now one could say, well, what about eating meat and that kind of thing? What the Buddha taught was that it's the act of killing, not the act of eating, that messes us up. And you can think about that and explore. Thich Nhat Hanh, a modern, incredible teacher who died pretty recently, and goes on and expands these precepts. And he said also, I won't kill, and I won't let others kill in my name. The positive statement of that is, I intend to become kind and of service to everybody. Now that we can have a wonderful time with. Because one then goes through the world, how can I be of service? Who can I help? Can I help my spouse? Can I help my child? Can I help the person next door? Can I stop and help someone having mechanical trouble by the road? Can I? See, you see that on the one hand, it's like, I'm so selfish that I'm packing a revolver and if you get in my way, I'll kill you. Or I'll go about finding ways I can be of service. I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from taking that which is not freely given. When we take stuff that's not freely given, when we take stuff that clearly isn't ours, there's a little knot that happens inside. There's a Buddhist term for it that's really colorful, I think. It says, we violate our uprightness of heart. There's a story, I haven't written about this, but when I didn't do stealing at all as a kid, but in graduate school, the first time through, I stole a salad underneath the university complex. And I thought it was really cool. It's like, whoa, I stole something, yay. And 3 years later on a meditation retreat in India, it came to consciousness and it just bothered me terribly. I had to take my precepts again as a monk. And also when I was back in Toronto 2 or 3 years later, I went and paid for my salad. Because it was like, nope, that didn't feel good. And I mean, at the time, I was thinking when I was a monk and practicing, I was like, this is really ridiculous. It was a $3 salad. For God's sake, let me relax. But no. You can explore with this in your own life. How is it? What is it? Where in your life have you taken something that wasn't freely given? And what's been the effect on you? And we can, it's not just stuff. We can take more of someone's time. We can take more life energy from someone than they want to give. We can take more life energy from our own bodies than they want to give. And then the positive statement of that is really beautiful. I aspire to become a fountain of generosity. And you could contribute to PIMC. It's a great way to practice generosity. You could pay attention to yourself and what is it that you really, 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 really want? And give yourself that. For many people, when their minds quiet down and they start paying closer attention, they really want an hour a day of meditation practice, or they really want to go to the gym, or they really want to take care of themselves. And maybe you're in a relationship with someone whom it's easy to give to, and you can be generous. You can be generous with your time. You can spend 5 more minutes listening to a child that needs you. Though a caveat on this is many of us who are drawn in this direction have significant codependency. And we overgive to others. We do that, I'll give in the hope that maybe I'll get something back. And I worked in drug and alcohol treatment for many years and have a strong history of alcoholism in my family. And I learned many sophisticated definitions of codependency, but the one that really stuck goes like this. A codependent is a person who, when they fall off a cliff, someone else's life flashes before their eyes. We don't know our own needs at all. And it comes out of childhood where the parents were not able to be very giving. And so the child overperforms in hopes that they'll be taken care of. So, generosity. I'd like to give an example or two. Well, here's one of my favorites. Once you start doing this, you'll find opportunities arise all the time. Oh, I'll tell you this. My daughter and her partner, David, Tara and David, gave me for Christmas 24 plastic bags. In each one, there was a $10 bill, a meal in a bottle, a meal in a box, sort of, a power bar or two, and a couple of other good things, and then a copy of Mary Oliver's poem, Wild Geese. And I carried these in my car. They didn't last long, but when there was someone obviously in need, I had something to give them. It meant I could keep some cash in my wallet, which was very helpful. But once you start doing that, you will find opportunities to be generous all over. And your giving is in a way selfish. Not badly selfish, but it's selfish because you know how good it feels. And there's one other, I have a favorite story, which was late at night over at a gas station not far from here. I was on my way home and I went in to get gas, and there was this African-American man and a big boat like a Chevy Impala or something. And he looked imploringly at me. I thought, oh, here it is falling in my lap. And he said, "We live in Scappoose. We're running on fumes. Could you buy us a few gallons of gas?" And I went, "Yay, right, it comes to me." And I said, "Sure, pull up at the pump," and told attendant fill the guy's tank. And then I looked in the car and the woman looked awful, ashen. I went around to her window and said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "I've got 2 cracked teeth." And I said, "Have you taken any medication?" She said, "No." And so I went inside and bought some medication, a couple of bottles of water, and brought it out. She looked at me like I was from another planet. And then after the gas happened, he came up back to me and said, "Please give me your address because I want to send you the money." And I said, "You can't give me the money, but you can pay it forward." I told him about the movie. I said, "You got homework." Now here it is. This 5 years ago. I still take delight in every time I think of it, because we were together, right? We were helping each other. So just think of little ways you can be generous with yourself, at least. Number 3, I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from sexual acts which cause harm. The prime directive of sexual reproduction is make babies. And the impulse to make babies doesn't give a rip about morality, doesn't care about marriage, or it's just get this happening. And so in every culture, there are rules on we wear rings to help protect us, and we have ceremonies and so on. And when that impulse arises, it's incredibly powerful. There's a question. I won't ask you to put up your hands this time, but please raise your hand. Oh, let's do it. Please raise your hand if you've ever done something really stupid around sexuality. Look around the room. Why? Because you're a bad person? Nope. Because you're dealing with astounding forces that don't care about personalities at all. So there's this rule of training. I won't do it. I won't do it if it's going to hurt myself or somebody else. And you can expand it. Thich Nhat Hanh expanded it. I won't do it if the other person will be violating commitments they've made. Right? Or, well, you can think of the variations. It's huge. Incidentally, in terms of, what's the word? What's the word when you give permission? You consent. Oh, yeah. My stepdaughter, well, this was 6 years ago at U of O, makes me teary. You couldn't register at the university until you did a 2-hour class on consent. Right? You don't get to go to this school unless you've been somewhat educated about consent. Powerful. And if you go on YouTube, you can look up a cup of tea. A cup of tea. It's a little video made in Britain about, among them is, if your friend told you yesterday that they'd like a cup of tea, but they say they don't want a cup of tea today, then don't force them. If you're with your friend and they pass out, then they don't want a cup of tea. It's really beautiful, powerful. Good to show our teenagers. Then the positive statement of that. I aspire to use libido, to use this to actually bring love into the world. To actually, when the time is correct, to make love, to really make that a beautiful connecting thing. Similarly, libido makes art, makes all kinds of things. I aspire to use this mysterious energy for good. So you can hear this isn't a puritanical message. It's really about, I don't want to feel bad. It also, of course, means rape and coercion is not okay. Oh, and one more, which is, I had the occasion a few times in my life of being sexual when I really didn't want to. And it really felt bad because I was afraid to say no. Right? I didn't want to hurt the person's feeling, and it just felt awful. The precept says, don't do that. The fourth, I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from false and harmful speech. Wouldn't it be great to teach our presidential candidates about that? Wouldn't it be great if public discourse simply said, our children are watching, you can't say this? No, there's one piece of it too, which is called idle chatter, which is talking for the sake of talking, which would eliminate most television, would certainly eliminate all those talk shows about sports. Well, we were sportsing this morning very well. The second half, we sports less well. Yes, the other team was substitute any sport. They're always saying the same thing again and again and again. And people are watching. It's bizarre. And we also talk to fill up time, space. Lying, slander. If Jim and I were talking, and we were talking about one of you, and maybe in a negative way, I'm going to use Paul. That Paul, he really is a pain in the ass, isn't he? And so we talk about Paul, and we're doing that to avoid intimacy with each other. We're not talking about our relationship, we're talking about the children. And the next time I'm with Paul, I've spoken badly of him. There's a wall. I can't be with Paul unless I were to say, I was with Jim the other day and I said these horrible things about you. Because then we could be intimate again. So, gossip, slander, harsh speech. When we talk, it really makes sense to be kind. The purpose that the Buddha said, when you're going to speak, is it kind? Is it true? Can you do it gently, calmly, kindly? And is it the right time? And around speech, there was someone called Marshall Rosenberg who created nonviolent communication, which is learnable. And you can get the book, you can watch online. Even a few hours spent on learning the rudiments of nonviolent communication will change your life. And also lying. There's maybe I could put this on, I'll put this on the blog. There's a little book, it's not TV. There's a little article by Sam Harris on lying. And once you read that, you'll change your relationship to lying because it doesn't work. I know when I first read it, I changed several of my relationships around a lot. And it turns out that it worked pretty well. Okay, speech. Let me just think if there's anything else. Gossip. Passing on information you don't know to be true. Exaggerating. The positive statement, enter Marshall Rosenberg. I aspire to use speech to bring harmony and connection into the world. I'm, as you may be able to guess, ridiculously extroverted. I hardly know what I'm going to say before it comes out of my mouth. I often discover what it is when my heart is open and I feel very comfortable in the world, and I find these things coming to mind to say to strangers that they're always, I was at the Blues Festival yesterday, it's like, oh my God, that's a beautiful dress. Or, wow, that hat. There was a couple standing there, an African-American couple, my age or older, and they were dancing, and I was watching them. And I caught his eye. You were there when this happened. I caught this man's eye, and I walked up to him and I said, oh my God, you are the most exquisite couple I've ever seen. And they looked and they just melted. And it was true. So we can use speech, and not, you don't have to do that. That's for the crazy extroverts, and occasionally it doesn't work. You know, it could be intrusive or something, but mostly it does. I'll tell you one other. This was great. I was sitting in my car waiting for somebody, and it was just starting to rain. And a postal carrier, it was starting to rain fairly hard. A postal carrier came down and was passing my car. And I said, hey. And he looked in and I said, this is the voice of your mother. Why don't you have a raincoat? I have no idea where it came from. But he stood there in the rain and we talked for 5 minutes. I don't know where it came from. But we can have so much fun with speech. And it's about, I'm appreciative of you. You can do that with loved ones too. And internally, to develop lots of congratulatory, appreciative, loving statements. Because you can also work with meditation on self-hatred. That's a different story. Now, going on to the last. Never let a single opportunity for a compliment pass unspoken, at least in your own head. Number 5, I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from the use of intoxicants that dull the mind and intoxicating devices that lead to zombie behavior. Now that's a big one. Do you know that the use of alcohol doubled in the state of Oregon during COVID? And the use of legal marijuana went up 70%. Why? People were hurting a lot, couldn't distract themselves. My experience of substances in my life has been, my father had 6 siblings, all of whom were alcoholic. My father died drunk, never sobered up. My mother's side, there were 7 alcoholics, and my mother was a binge drinker. She had a stroke, so she wound up stopping. My own history has been that my use has been diminishing, really to the vanishing point. And what I've discovered is, even a little bit, 1 glass of wine in the evening, the next morning when I'm sitting in meditation, I'm pretty dull. Now, it's not like you're a bad person if you do, but it's the price that we're paying. Is the price worth it? So you can hear it's not about good and bad. It's about the price. About what do I really want to do? I want to walk through the world and feel loving. I want to face my own moods, my own depression, my own anxiety, and so on. I want to face it with kindness and with the capacity of waking up and remembering, oh, this is a state. This isn't who I am. And these are monstrous. I watched my children. There's one particular example when my stepdaughter was in grade 12. I forget. No, when she was 12 years old. Yeah. We had a party. We had 12 girls over. Slept in the living room. I came out at like 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning. Every single one of them was on their phone with someone who wasn't in the room. And some school, is it LA? I forget where it is. They passed a law that the kids in the classroom can't have their phones. And the ACLU will be all over it too, because what if they need to call their parent? And so they're not in the classroom. And we're creating, it was so hard for me when I came to meditation to not be constantly stimulated. Our kids. So, what do we want to do? Sometimes we want to abstain. In fact, come next week to British Columbia and do a 10-day retreat and put your phone away. See what happens. Actually, on my retreats, I offer people that I will keep your phone for you if you want. And what I do, and I say, what I'll do is put it up here with the Buddha. And if you really need it, you can get it, but have a little barrier. The positive statement is, the opposite of addiction and distraction is being awake, being here. And it's such a relief to have a mind that will go quiet. To just be sitting and just be sitting. It's not hypercosmic flashing lights, it's just quiet. And when the mind can go quiet, then you'll notice when a thought arises, you'll notice that thoughts think themselves. There's not even someone thinking thoughts. And when anxiety arises, you'll notice, oh, that's anxiety. But we have to know how to inhabit a place that isn't consuming. You know, it's like with the computer, if you want to work on the operating system, you shut down all the programs. So that's true for us. So these are the 5 precepts. There's more. There's another, can I remember there's 8 precepts some people take when they go on retreat or they live their lives this way, which is no food after noon, no decorations of the body, no, and I forget the third one, but that's not the way a household or a person like us would be living their life. But these other 5, and I will post them today so you can tune in on them if you want, they'll change your life. And if there's one of them that you're actively indulging, you might dial it back. Try for a day not to do it, or try for a week not to gossip, not to talk about anyone who's not present. All of a sudden, conversation goes. It's not about guilt. It's about, last thing, in any given moment in the mind, there are various mental factors that pop up. We're cultivating mindfulness, curiosity, energy, joy, tranquility, equanimity, and concentration. Those are the 7 enlightenment factors. We're reining in greed, hatred, restlessness and agitation, sloth and torpor, and doubt. We're reining those in, and we're growing these others. There's 2 mental factors which are of extraordinary importance. They're called moral shame and moral dread. Hili and otupa. And moral shame is something that you feel, that we naturally feel, is built in if our prefrontal cortex has developed. When we do something that violates our ethical code, it doesn't feel good. Oh, I did something. I'm going to confess. The other night I was at the theater. I was watching, it's a new Pixar movie, Inside Out 2. Really worth seeing if you're a meditator. Very fascinating. But I rarely do this. Well, it's embarrassing. I went out. I wanted to get something from the candy section, and I got it. And I went up to the counter, and it turns out that at that theater you have to wait from the back of the line with the people that are coming in with their tickets. And I didn't want to wait that long, and I had it in my hand. And I said to the young man, "You mean, can I not just buy this?" And he said, "No, you have to wait in line." And I just dropped it on the counter and walked away. Now that was rude. I went to look for him after to make amends, but he was gone. So, and what there was when I did it, it felt good for a moment. But by the time I got back to my seat, it was the moral shame. It was like, oh, that wasn't nice. Wow. That poor kid had this gray-haired man act somewhat violently toward him. Yeah, awful. So it felt bad. And then I went, and moral shame is one. But then moral dread is the next time an opportunity to act in that way arises, you'll feel bad in advance and you won't do it. So this intervenes and keeps clearing up our moral and ethical behavior. So I've run over a little bit. I will stop. Thank you for listening. As usual, I hope what I just said will absolutely change your life for the better. You can.
This has been a Dharma talk offered by Robert Beatty, guiding teacher of PIMC, the Portland, Oregon Insight Meditation Community. For more information, you may go to www.robertbeatty.com. That's www.robertbeatty.com.